Hello, hello, hello. So I've been playing a lot of Civ 6 recently, and previously I've seen videos creating tier lists for different things in this game, like wonders or leaders or whatever. Um, so I went to look and see if there was one for policy cards, and I couldn't find any. So I figured, um, why not be the change you want to see in the world? Um, Now, I've put over 200 hours in this game, but as anyone knows who's played Civ, that doesn't equate to a whole lot of games. Certainly, I think I've only beaten games with about half the leaders, maybe a bit less. So I don't claim to be an expert. I've recently just beaten the game on deity for each of the five difficulty types, but only one game on each. So I think I have some experience of different ways of playing the game, but I'm definitely not claiming this to be some kind of authoritative list, and I have all the answers. So if anybody has any um, things they think that I might be undervaluing or overvaluing or whatever, I definitely welcome any feedback. So just to explain the tiers, so basically S is going to be stuff that you're going to pretty much want to use in every game, and in every game it's going to be useful. So there's a lot of these policy cards which are very useful in some circumstances or for specific victory types. Um, that obviously makes them very good if you're going for those victory types or if you're in certain circumstances, but in other circumstances they're not useful at all. So they're not going to get into this top category, but they probably will get into A, which is for cards which are sort of quite useful, and you probably want to, and you are going to want to use them, but you're not going to. They're not going to be as much of a game changer for all victory types, or ones which are very game changing for specific victory types. And then B's kind of level above that. C is I've got in mind something quite specific, which is basically just the stuff you kind of put in to fill slots. There are certain cards here which aren't necessarily going to make or break a game, or they're not going to be like fundamentally to your planning, or you're probably not going to build a plan around them. But there's probably going to be some times in your game where you're just going to have slots to fill where there's nothing in particular that you want to use them for to achieve a certain goal. But these are the kind of things which they kind of give you a decent boost. They kind of give you a decent boost in any circumstance. So they're just the kind of thing that you put in there. D is for stuff which does give you a boost in certain circumstances, but for various reasons, I think they're a bit underpowered. Like you might use them, but I feel like if they were well balanced, maybe they'd have something a bit extra. An F for the card, which you pretty much just don't want to use. And yeah, they're really underpowered. And yeah, so and I should also say that they're being judged basically on the time that they're most useful during the game. So obviously, a lot of these cards get superseded, get outclassed by cards you get later on in the game. But I'm not necessarily saying that the later ones are necessarily better because they're stronger, because at the point that you're able to use them in the game, they might be stronger. And also, so I'm doing economic cards here. I'm going to follow this up and do the other kind of policy cards as well. So we'll start off with aesthetics. I think this goes in D. So the adjacency bonuses generally give pretty decent, pretty average, but the kind of things that you'll end up using all the time and end up will giving you the sort of kind of a boost that will be useful at that time. But I think uh, theatre squares are the weakest of the theatre square bonus is the weakest of them, because on the higher difficulties, and I should clarify that, because recently I've been playing on deity and immortal. These are the difficulties they have in mind. These are the difficulties where you're going to have to make the best use of your policy cards, and therefore these are the ones we should consider when asking what are the best policy cards. It's very hard to get wonders in the early game. So in the sort of mid game, the early to mid game, when you're getting this card, you're not going to be able to make much use of its adjacency bonus. Maybe you'll be able to get the district adjacency bonus, a +1 bonus, or maybe a +2 bonus if you've been careful in your planning. But to get up into the higher bonuses, you're going to want to have wonders. And at the time when you get this card, you're not going to have a lot of wonders in place. So this bonus is probably going to be smaller than other equivalent bonuses you can get from the cards. Caravanserais. I think this is another D. We're starting off quite negative. I mean, this is a card, like you get some kind of benefit from it, but I feel like a better version of this card would be a card that gives you a boost to producing traders, because at the point which you get it, which is very early in the game, you're not going to have any trade routes, and also it's probably going to be a while before you get a significant number of trade routes where you're going to be able to get a significant amount of gold that's going to be able to, from this card, to make a difference in the game. But most of the time that you're going to have this card, and until better options come along, you're not going to have enough trade routes to really make a difference from it. So I find myself very, very rarely, if at all, using this card. Next, Civil Prestige. Established governors with at least 2 promotion levels provide +1 amenity and +2 housing. This is a pretty strong effect. +1 amenity, +2 housing. Again, at the time which you get it, this is going to be like 2 or 3 cities. Now, +1 amenity, +2 housing, 2 or 3 cities is quite a significant effect. So maybe I'll put it up to B. But it's I should say it's not an insignificant effect. But by the time realistically, because you're going to have a money in a foreign city state probably, this is going to apply to 6 cities. And in the late game, you're probably going to have a lot more than six cities. So this is a pretty decent effect, but also it doesn't. And in some cases, it can be useful, but it doesn't really help you go towards particularly one of those victory types. So I think maybe it's a low B. Collectivization. Now, I probably use this card more than I should. The thing is in the early game, your domestic trade routes tend to be a lot more powerful than foreign trade routes. But then in the late game, the use of food in particular becomes less powerful, because you start to become at the point where you don't want to grow your cities anymore and you want to use them for something productive. And the production boost you get from domestic trade routes becomes less, because it becomes outclassed by other ways of getting production. Whereas for foreign trade routes, it's true that the yields go up for domestic trade routes, the amount of food and production go. The amount of yields you can get from that go up as the game goes on, but it doesn't scale as fast as the gains you can get from foreign trade routes, which get much stronger as the game goes on. So around the time that you're getting this card, or maybe even slightly before you're getting this card, is the time when you should really be switching more to using foreign trade routes. However, I think if you're really micromanaging the game, that's kind of how you should play it. But more often than not, especially if you've got like 20 trade routes or something like that, it can be just kind of get easy in the habit of thinking this trade route is doing me good, I'm just going to keep on going it. And then at the time this card comes around, +2 production, +4 and +4 for every trade route has the potential to be an amazing boost, a really strong boost, if you've still got a lot of domestic trade routes. But it's only, this is limited. You need to have a communist government in order to have this. And you're realistically only going to be using a communist government if you're going for science victory. So it's a very strong boost, but the time that you're going to be using it is quite selective. And also, to be fair, if you're going for a communist government, you get less benefit from foreign trade routes. So if you're kind of planning ahead, yes, I'm going for science victory. Yes, I want to use a communist government. Then you can kind of plan your trade routes ahead, and you can get a lot of benefit from this card. But I think because it's selective, it only goes into B. Colonization +50% production towards settlers. I think this is an S. I mean, production of settlers is so important and it's such a significant boost. I think the big thing when it comes to judging these sort of production modifiers and how useful they are is there going to be a time when you're going to want to be concurrently producing a lot of these? And I think for settlers, it is the case. I mean, mitigating against this is the fact that there's a lot of incentives in the game from the governors, from Magnus, from the is it the Ancestral Hall, the Government Plaza building, which is going to encourage you to basically just make one city the city that you make a load of settlers in. But the you can definitely benefit from other times when you have several cities producing settlers at once, and in which case this becomes a very, very significant boost. I mean, it's a very, very significant boost, something that's very, very important. So really, at some point in every single game, or nearly every game, you're going to want to have a time when you do this, and it's going to provide you with a big benefit. Corvée, I think this is D, because as I was saying before, it's really hard to get ancient and classical wonders on higher difficulties. The only time you're really going to go for ancient classical wonders is if you're playing for a civ that gives you a benefit in order to reach them early, and even then it's going to be a bit of a struggle. Or if you really want to gun for a particular wonder that's essential for your strategy, say you're going for diplomatic victory and you want the temple that gives you the extra diplomatic points. So in those cases, it can be quite useful. At the same time, in the early game, you don't have many policy slots, so more likely there's going to be something else which is going to give you a bigger benefit than this. I mean, 15% is quite a modest benefit, and you're unlikely to be going in the early game to be going for multiple on high difficulties. You're going to be going for multiple wonders in different cities, which reduces the benefit of it. E-commerce, +2 production, +5 gold from all trade routes. This is I think B for this. This is a very substantial. This is a very substantial boost. I mean, it's a bit later in the game than collectivization, but it applies to all trade routes, and also it doesn't rely on you having communism. So I think I'd place it higher than that. Yeah, I mean, I should say this about collectivization as well. What's great about an additional production boost from trade routes is it just gives you a lot more freedom. It just gives you a lot more control over where you want production to be distributed in your empire. So if you have that flexibility when it comes to where that production goes, provided that you plan it out in advance, that's a lot more useful thing to have than, say, a flat production boost in all cities, which doesn't give you the same kind of control. I mean, I'm thinking of things like the Admonson Scott station. These kind of boosted production that you get from trade routes is absolutely essential to get that. So if you're relying on that, I mean, that's quite a selective example, but there's all kinds of examples. I mean, in a science victory, it's this kind of thing is so important. Economic Union plus 100% commercial hub and harbour distant adjacency bonuses. I'll come on to this a bit later, but commercial hub adjacency bonuses are probably the easiest to get and the easiest to plan for. And harbour is probably second. So it's going to be quite easy. You know, pretty much every time that you're placing a commercial hub or a harbour, you're going to be getting a significant adjacency bonus from it. So plus 100%, you know, it's a decent amount of gold. Again, I mean, I put it in C because this is a good example of what I intend C4. I mean, I'll use this in a lot of games, but I won't be using it specifically because this is going to help me achieve something. I mean, maybe sometimes I'll be like, okay, I need to buy something, so I need something that'll be generated gold. But generally, just because, I've got another slot open, this gives me a lot of gold, that's always going to be useful. Expropriation, plus 50% production towards settlers, plot purchase cost reduced by 20%. Now, this is a powerful effect, but by the time that you get this card, these factors are going to be a lot less important. I mean, obviously, it depends on your strategy. It depends on the map you're playing on. Potentially, by the time you get this card, there could be a lot of land to exploit still, especially if you're playing on like a new world map or something like that. Or you're planning on using the colonial golden age boosts. But generally, in the later game, not only are you less likely to want to get settlers, you're also less likely to want to purchase tiles because you're going to be less in a race to claim certain tiles, and also the bonuses you get from individual tiles are going to be less substantial. I suppose an exception to that is if you're trying to claim resources. If you're trying to claim particular strategic resources that become available in the late game, this card might be useful. But also, as the game goes on, it depends. If you're playing a very wide game, this might not be the case, but generally, the production investment for a settler becomes less substantial, and ergo, the production benefit you get from this isn't going to be as important. So, this is a powerful effect, but it's coming at a time which is quite inopportune to take advantage of it, and ergo it's quite a lot weaker than colonization up here. 5-year plan plus 100% campus and industrial zone adjacency bonuses. Yeah, I think this is. Part of me wants to put this in a C because it kind of fits the bill of what I said of like a filler thing, but I think normally at the time that I get this, often when I get this card, I'll be playing the 100% boost to campus bonuses, natural philosophy, as well as the 100% boost to industrial bonuses anyway, because they give me decent effects. So the fact that this combines into one card, if you're already doing that, that effectively just gives you an extra policy slot, which is quite a powerful effect. So if at the time you get this card, it's worth having those cards separately, then I would say that definitely puts these effects a tier above this sort of C sort of filler tier that I was talking about. Free market, extra gold from buildings in commercial hubs, plus 50% if the population is higher than 15, or plus 50% if if the district adjacency bonus is above 4. So as we'll get onto it, I'm not a big fan of these cards, these sort of later cards where you get the plus 50% bonus to buildings, because it's quite hard to it's much harder to achieve the requirements to take advantage of it as it is the plus 100% bonuses. Because the 15 one, again, it depends on what civ you're playing or what kind of game you're playing, but normally I have quite a few cities which reach 15 population or higher. So admittedly, those are the ones with that tend to have the most buildings in them, but still, when I sort of when it adds up to how much money or what an extra advantage that is, it tends to be weaker than other options of the bonuses that other policy cards give me. Now, I think of all of these cards, the free market one is probably the best because of the other part of this bonus, which is about plus 50% if the district adjacency bonus is higher than 4. Because I was saying before, the commercial hub adjacency bonus is the easiest to get and is the easiest to get into high values. That this is the easiest bonus to trigger of all of them, which is why it's in C and not D. But it's definitely on the lower end of C. And I don't find myself using it often, apart from if I just have a spur slot, and it just happens because of how the maths works out at that point that this is better than other equivalent cards I could use. God King, I think, is a D. A high D because you will end up using it quite a bit. You'll probably end up using it more than these other cards that I'm going to put in D. But I do think it is quite underpowered because, if you compare it, basically when you get it, you're either going to be using this card, using the +1 production in all cities. And in the majority of cases, the +1 production all cities is the most powerful effect. I mean, really, this card is for one thing and one thing only, and that's for finding a Pantheon and getting the Pantheon you want. But there's normally other ways of getting it, either because a lot of civs have got religious bonuses, or you can get faith from city states or goody huts. And the +1 faith a turn, it isn't, and you only get it after 20 turns or whatever it turns out to be anyway, because you need to get Code of Laws first. So it doesn't actually end up having a hugely substantial effect, I think, in getting yourself early to a Pantheon so you can choose a Pantheon you particularly want. Of course, if there is a Pantheon that you really want and you think it's going to make a big difference to you, then it makes sense to play this because it gives you a better chance, but I don't think it gives you enough of a better chance. And the +1 gold is very insignificant. I think maybe this card would be better balanced if it was +1 faith and +2 gold or something like that. But in the vast majority of cases, I think the +1 production boost is more valuable. Gothic architecture. I mean, this is very similar to Corvée, where you're going to find it hard to use it, but it's better than Corvée. You're going to find it hard to compete for wonders at this time, but it's better at Corvée because at this point you should be getting more competitive, you should be getting stronger, you should be more able to compete for these wonders, and also you'll have more policy slots. So there'll be less competition. You'll be losing out less from opportunity costs. Grand Opera. I think this is D. I mean, I've just spoken about how generally I think these cards are worse than the +100% bonuses, and I've also talked about how the culture adjacency bonuses are harder to get. Now, admittedly, you do get this later in the game where you're likely to get some wonders down. So if you're planning properly, maybe you will be able to take advantage of that bonus. Maybe it's more like you are able to take advantage of that bonus. But I do think it's a bit underpowered, hence why it's in D. If you're trying to get a lot of culture and if you have the right setup, maybe you'll use this card. But generally, I think this card is weak and you're less likely to use it than a lot of these other ones. Heritage tourism. So heritage tourism is a good example. And I think I'll get the other tourism cards as well because I'll say pretty much exactly the same thing about them. Well, online communities is a bit different, so I'll come to that in a bit. But these two, plus 100% tourism from great works of art, plus 200% tourism from great works of music, it's very simple. If you're going for culture victory, you're going to use these cards. If you're not going to go for culture victory, you're not going to use these cards. They're quite boring cards. There's not much strategy to them. It's like if you go for the victory, you use it and it makes you a lot likely to win. If you're not going to use it. But that's just how it is. If you're going for culture victory, these are very, very strong cards. They're must-have cards. If you're not, they're just not important at all. Plus 30% production towards builders. I think I'll put this in B because plus 30% is just like it's a powerful effect. Additional production towards builders. And builders are definitely the kind of thing where you can plan it so that it's you can be making them in different cities at once, and you're probably going to want them in different cities at once. So maybe I will put it in A, so that you'll produce them in different cities at once, so you can make more advantage of it. But 30% is not a hugely substantial difference in the very early game. Plus 1 production for every city is probably going to be a bigger effect. And actually, I can't remember exactly when it is, but you lose access to this card surprisingly early. I think quite a bit before you get access to the card that replaces it and gives you the 30% bonus. So I think because you're quite limited, you're more limited in the amount of time that you can use it for, I'll drop it down to B again. In Chalet, plus water housing in all cities with at least 2 specialist districts. Yeah, I mean, there is definitely a use case for this card because kind of when you get it, you might be having some housing problems. Um, I do think it's a bit narrow, like +1 housing. I suppose the thing is like a difference in housing at this point in the game between growing your city by one population could potentially, if we're talking about sort of marginal gains, snowballing, that could potentially make a big difference down the line. So if you are at a point in this game when this card becomes available, when you're having housing difficulties, and there isn't another card which you think would have a better effect, making you achieve something, this card could end up further down the line having quite substantial effects. But if there is a card that you're gonna more likely want to use and is going to be more useful to achieve a specific goal, you're going to want to use that card. Ergo, it goes into the filler seat. Land surveyors reduce the cost of purchasing a tile by 20%. I think. Yeah, it's definitely better than expropriation because at the time that you get this, you kind of care more about saving and you know the kind of costs of buying a tile. That kind of scale of purchase is more important to you. You can plan it so you can just have this in for a turn for a short amount of time, and you can buy a load of tiles, and that can amount to a quite significant saving. It's not something you're guaranteed to be using, so it's not SNA tier. But in some cases, if you use it right, this can have quite powerful effects. Liberalism +1 amenity to all cities with at least 2 specialist districts. Yeah, I mean, obviously this is similar to Insulay. I think you're more likely to want to go for the +1 housing. I mean, it depends on the circumstance. If you've not got a housing problem, you're not going to go for Insulay. But at the same time, are you really going to go for liberalism? I mean, +1 amenity to all cities. Yeah, I mean that could make a difference. But the thing is like not all of your cities are going to be at the point where +1 amenity makes a difference. So in that case, it's not very efficient. So I think you're more likely to go to Insulay. But again, like Insulay, if there's a card that you've got that you want to achieve a specific thing for, you're more likely to want to go for that than this card. Market economy, your international trade routes provide +1 gold per luxury and strategy resource. I think this is the best of these sort of filler cards. In the late game, you're probably going to have a lot of international trade routes. This could amount to quite a substantial amount of money. So why not use it? Yeah. Medina Quarter +2 housing in all cities with at least 3 specialty districts. I think this is better than Insulay because the extra addition of +2 housing is probably going to make a bigger difference. Like the cities which you're more likely to be struggling with in terms of housing, or at least you're more likely to care about in terms of whether they're struggling in terms of housing, are going to be the ones that are already large enough to have at least 3 specialist districts anyway. And +2 housing. Yeah. I mean, +2 housing has a more substantial effect, obviously, but are you going to be keeping this policy card in long enough that it's the +2 housing is going to make an effect, unless it's already at the point where adding +2 housing, it's already exceeded its housing limit, which is less likely to happen? I'm not sure. I would say this is probably a bit better than Chile, but I'm not confident on that. Natural philosophy +100% district adjacency bonuses. I think at the time you get this, it's quite easy to plan campuses early on. There's quite a few places you can place it to get decent adjacency bonuses. So at the time you get this, the kind of bonus you can get from it, because you're exactly the point where you're looking to sort of snowball and where little advantages make a big difference, and you're also exactly at the point where you've kind of got your base set up, and you're probably wanting to get more science, I think it comes at an opportune time, and you're likely to want to use it. Naval infrastructure plus 100% harbour district adjacency bonuses. I think this is, it's one of these filler cards that I'm talking about, but I think you're more likely going to be able to get use out of the commercial hub district adjacency bonuses. I think at the time that you get this, you're like, obviously it depends what kind of map you're playing on, what kind of Civ you're playing on, what kind of game style you're playing, but you're more likely to be able to get more advantage of this. So in some cases this can be better, but generally if you're just looking for a filler card to get more money, you're going to want to go for this. New Deal, +4 housing, +2 amenities in all cities, at least 3 specialist districts. I think this card is insanely powerful. The only thing that's me point in S is the fact that it's only available behind Democracy. Now, I think Democracy is probably the strongest of the 3 modern era governments. Basically, you're going to be using fascism if you go for a domination victory. You're probably going to be using communism if you're going for science victory, but not necessarily. And if you're going for diplomatic victory, or cultural victory, or maybe science victory, or maybe religious victory, you're going to be going for democracy. So I think it's the government you're most likely going to be using. But this effect, +4 housing, +2 amenities, and also with 3 special district, this makes such a huge difference. Like the second I put this in my policy slot, you just see all your cities just doing much better just in an instant. Well, all your cities with at least 3 specialist districts, and then when you move on to using the later information era governments. This is like not having this card is something I really miss. It's something you're like, well, the extra addition, because those governments are very tailored towards certain victory types. The extra advantage you get from that is substantially achieving that, but it's something that you really miss. So yeah, it's very strong. Online communities +50% tourism output, civilizations to which we have a trade route. Yeah, this is the same as these two. I'd say but the reason I say it's a bit different is just because it's a bit stronger. It's kind of the same, it's just boring, and if it's culture victory, you're going to go for it. But I think overall, the effects of this, again, you can target it to the civilizations which you most need it for, but realistically, I guess unless you're playing on a really huge map, you're going to be able to have trade routes to all civilizations, minus maybe the ones you're at war at or whatever, or you can't make peace with, because if you're going for a culture victory, you're going to want to make peace with them. But yeah, the overall tourism effect is significantly greater than these two, although obviously if you're going for a culture victory, you're going to use all of them, and they're all going to make a difference. Public transport, this is an F. This is just such a weak effect. Like when I look at like the difference this is going to make when I place it in, like it's never substantial. Like you would have to put so much investment in to neighborhoods and getting them in the right places in order to get what is not a hugely substantial boost. And again, you don't get the flexibility, like I was saying, with the collectivization, production boosts, and to a lesser extent food boosts, are most useful when you have a lot of control over where you give them. Now, generally I find the cities I have with neighborhoods are the least likely to need food because I've already just given them a neighborhood, and it's less likely, or it's going to take a longer time, and therefore it's going to be less likely to be significant, that they're going to need food by the time they need a new neighborhood. And there's other ways to raise its housing anyway. So I think this is a really weak card. I never use it. Public works +30% production towards builders, and newly trained builders get 2 extra build actions. This is a really good card. Maybe I'll do serfdom now. Serfdom is an S. this is such a strong card. I mean, obviously, if you compare it to Ilkham plus 30% production towards builders, in a sense, you could say this gives you plus 67 production towards builders. I mean, it's not quite because not all cities, depending on if you have the pyramids or if you have different governors, you're not necessarily going to be starting with free every time. And also, not every builder charge has got equal value. But to a first degree approximation, this effectively gives you a 67% production to builders. But not just that, the total effect ends up being much more substantial because the price of builders goes up with how many builders you make. So if you're using this card consistently, or at least if you're planning the production of your builders, so it always coincides with using this card, it's going to hugely reduce the amount of time, the amount of investment that you're putting into making builders. So this is a really, really strong card, and thus this is also. I mean, at the time you get this card, builders are less powerful. You're less likely to want to use builders. You'll get less use out of each one, but and a lot of the time, the purposes you're using the builders for, if you're using them to finish spaceport projects off, for example, this makes no difference. Well, the second part of it doesn't. Like I said, the first part of it isn't that significant, but it's still a powerful boost. Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll say an advantage of Ilcom. That if you're making a load of builders at the same time to make advantage of that, you might as well have this card in as well and sort of get a double whammy. So the existence of this card makes this card a bit stronger. Rationalism, like I've said, these plus 50% extra cards are a bit weak, but yeah, these plus 50% extra cards are a bit weak, and normally there's better options. I think it is maybe just a filler card because there are times where you're just like, oh, that's kind of enough science that it's just worth putting in this slot. But a lot of the time, you're not going to be pumped in this bonus for many cities, and the plus 50% bonus, adjacency bonus, is harder to get than it is for gold. Religious orders. I think this is quite a strong card because the thing is, I don't end up using this very often. You're only obviously going to be using it if you're going for religious victory, so that immediately makes it more selective. But even every time you're going for religious victory, you're not necessarily going to be going for it, because you're only going to be using it in games with a religious victory, where there's another civilization which is going for a religious victory and is playing a very strong and aggressive religious game. And only at the points where you're interacting with that civ. So either when you're trying to convert that civ, or you're trying to convert a civ that you're battling for control of religious influence of with this other civ. So it's quite selective in its use case, but those games where you're having to compete very hard, like in the other games where you're having quite an easy time of it, it's like I was saying about how it's most important to consider higher difficulty levels. The games where you're not having to be as competitive, it's less relevant than what your policy cards pick. Then, like your policy cards choice are less important because you're going to have an easier time winning anyway. When your policy cards are most important and most valuable is in those close games where they can give you that small little advantage. And in that case, having a +5 religious strength and theological combat could make a big difference. So even though I don't use it very often, I think because when it's important, it's the game which is important in, it proves to be very important. Or at least those are the games we should consider the most strongly when consider how strong the policy cards are. That's why it's got quite high placement. Scripture plus 100% holy site adjacency bonuses. Yeah, I guess It's relatively easy to get decent holy site adjacency bonuses. But not easy, I should say. It's towards the middle of the pack. So definitely, kind of, if you're going for a religious game, it is just the kind of thing you're going to be like, yeah, that's a decent bonus. I mean, it's not going to give you an enormous bonus. You're not going to be sort of relying on this card to sort of make a big difference. But either if you're going for a religious game, a religious victory, or if you're going for, if you're using the Grandmaster's Chapel, and I mean, maybe it's even more relevant in that case, because at that point you might not have a lot of other ways to, because you're not building your whole game around faith. Your faith generation might be pretty meager, so you might be less reliant on faith from other sources, from expensive buildings. It might not be worth your time producing. So in those kind of situations, you kind of figure, yeah, might as well have this card in place. So I think it is sort of a C filler kind of thing. Simultaneum, extra faith from buildings and holy sites, 50%. This is. I've already talked about my distaste for these plus 50% cards, but also, the time when you get this, of all the resources which these cards can give you, the faith is the most selective. There's going to be sometimes you don't care about faith at all. And in a lot of games when you would have been cared about faith, unless you're going for a religious victory, it's dropping off in importance. So I think it is less. This type of card is a type of card I don't really like, and I think this is one of the weaker ones. This one I put in D. Plus 15% production of all wonders. This is probably the card I'm the most undecided about in terms of where to put it. I mean, you don't have the problem you have with these cards here, where at the time when you could use this card, you can definitely compete for wonders. You probably will make some wonders. I suppose using the same, most wonders at this point, you're not going to have to keep compete very hard for. Having to beat other people out is a consideration, but it's much less likely a consideration. However, like I was saying before, those games when you're at the point where you get this card and you're still, very even, or maybe still being slightly ellipsed by the CPUs, the computers, to compete for wonders. Those are the ones where it's most important to think about the benefits which policy cards can give you, and also even not considering the sort of race aspect of it. You're still getting a sort of an opportunity cost benefit from it, because you're going to be able to finish those wonders a bit sooner and then start working on something else. So for that reason, I think I'm going to put it in B. And also, at the time you get this, you have more policy slots, so you're losing out less on the opportunity cost because of it. Plus 100% theatre square district adjacency bonuses and stadium generate plus one amenity. I mean, I kind of feel like plus one amenity is roughly equivalent to plus 100% adjacency bonuses. The kind of benefits you get from it are roughly equivalent. So because of that, I wouldn't say it's particularly stronger or weaker than the other kinds of these cards, where you kind of combine different adjacency bonuses. At the point you get this card, you're more likely to be able to take advantage of the Theatre Square adjacency bonuses. So I suppose the thing is about stadiums is, even at the point you get this card, stadiums are quite far down the tree. You're probably not going to have stadiums in all your cities, even the ones that have entertainment districts. And you're probably not going to have entertainment districts in many cities, and you're not going to build stadiums in many cities because of the bonus, the proximity bonus you get from stadiums. So because of that, the stadium bonus is sort of weaker, even though if plus one immunity is nice to have, because you're less likely to be building those stadiums. So I think this goes here, because I think the effect of this, the combined effect of these plus 100% bonuses is a bit weaker than the other ones, like Economic Union. Trade Confederation, plus 1 culture, plus 1 science for international trade routes. Yeah, this is a good sort of motivator, because the time you get this card is exactly the time you should be transferring over from focusing more on domestic trade routes to more on international trade routes. Maybe A is a bit strong. B. Plus 1 culture, plus 1 science for international trade routes. It's a substantial effect. So you're probably going to want to be using this. Triangular trade. This is C. Plus 4 gold, plus 1 faith. This is the kind of bonus where you're like, I've got a spare slot. This is the kind of thing that will serve me nicely and make me a good amount of gold and a bit of faith. I mean, the sort of the context behind this card, triangular trade, aka slavery, it giving you faith, is a bit I don't really understand. But in terms of a card, even if you're doing it with a bit of a moral conscience, a bit of a stain in your moral conscience, you'll probably just popping it in there. Urban planning, plus 1 production, all cities. This is, I mean, you're going to be using this in every single game, aren't you? I guess the circumstances you're not using this card is if you're going very narrow. You've got a kind of stuff that allows you to play very, very tall, to not settle many cities, and also you're playing a religious game, so you're going to go for God King. But generally, you want to settle a lot of cities, and at the time you get this card, your cities are going to be quite weak. This plus 1 production is going to be a very substantial bonus. You're going to be able to get a lot more. It's going to be a big boost to your production, and you're going to be able to get that snowball rolling a lot quicker. This is a brilliant card. So yes, these are my thoughts. When I was sort of did this test run, I ended up with 2 cards in F, so I don't know what's changed. I think maybe I put Caravanserais in S because I don't use it. But yeah, these are my thoughts. Let me know what you think.